Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give it a minute just to let everybody come into the webinar, and then we will get started. All right. Hi, everyone. I am CML Engagement and Communications Manager, Sarah Werner. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Smart Cities 101, Elements of Smart Government, Part 1. As you may have noticed when you signed up, this is a two-part series, so Part 2 will air on Thursday. This webinar is being recorded, and the handouts and recording will be posted on our website at www.cml.org under training materials by the end of this. For those of you who aren't familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, you should see a control panel to the top right of your screen. You have an orange arrow to the left of the panel, which will minimize the entire box. All participants will be muted for the webinar, but are encouraged to ask questions by typing them into the question box on the control panel. We will hold a Q&A near the end of the webinar as time permits, so please feel free to type the questions as you think of them throughout the presentation, and then we'll cover them at the end. At this time, I would like to hand things over to Tyler Sweetak with the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. Tyler, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate the intro and the opportunity to talk about smart cities and the elements that make up smart governance here with everyone today. And thanks for all of your time as well. My name is Tyler Sweetak. As Sarah mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has the pleasure of working with about 26 different cities, counties, and state agencies across the state. And we partner them with other sectors, including business and academia, to find new ways of solving complex problems across the state of Colorado. And so we're here today to talk about what makes up smart government. We have a number of experts that get to do this day to day from a number of governments that we get to work with that will chat about their experience in implementing smart cities projects and smart government overall. So ultimately the agenda for today, just so you know what to expect for the next 60 minutes or so, I'm going to briefly frame the discussion today and give you a flavor of what we mean by elements of smart government. And then I will introduce our two groups of speakers today, the City of Centennial and Arapahoe County, as well as the City of Greenwood Village. And they'll talk about their experience in actually working with these different elements of smart government that I'll walk you through. And then finally, we'll end with plenty of time for kind of a discussion. And I've got some questions for our panelists, and I hope that you do as well. And we'll have a chance to be a little more informal with the end of our discussion today. So that's what's in store. For many of you, since all of you work in government, since you're part of CML, I'm sure even people that work in smart cities every day are trying to define exactly what a smart city is. And by definition, most cities define themselves by being smart, by how much they use the Internet of Things and the data that comes from these new connected devices to make smarter decisions. And that's not a wrong definition. However, in order to do that very well, we think that you need to have some process established that helps you understand how to solve problems that use the Internet of Things and these new tools that are available to government, but should not define them by itself. So we believe that smart cities are really innovative problem solvers, they're collaborative partners, and they're technology enthusiasts in that order. So technology is never really the first thing you should be looking at, but it's a tool, and we'll show you what these elements of smart government help you to use these new tools in better and smarter ways. So again, most of you probably think of smart cities in how you use specific technologies, whether, if you're not using artificial intelligence or if you don't have smart and connected traffic signals, you're not smart. And that is not necessarily the case. The specific technology or application Whether you're using it or not does not determine what makes you smart. In our opinion, it is the process by which you solve problems, and these 8 elements that I'm going to talk through are foundational steps to helping your government make smarter decisions. So this graphic shows you all of the things that you can connect in a city, right? Whether you're connecting your water infrastructure or your buildings or your utility grid, that is what most people think of as smart cities. But to do that well, we think that there is a structure that needs to be in place in order for governments to assess what sorts of technologies they can use in order to improve their government. So we've gotten to work with a lot of smart cities across the state and across the country. I've had the pleasure of working at CDOT and at the City of Denver on smart cities programs. And these are the things that we have found in common to running a really good smart cities program, and the structures that make up that process. So this is what we're going to focus on today, or these what we call elements of smart government. And there are 8 of them, and we're going to focus specifically on the first 4 today. But to just give you a flavor of all of them, and there is a handout that you guys can reference that talks through all of these in more detail than just the one little paragraph here. There's 8 of them, and they're things like governance. A lot of these technologies touch on multiple departments, and if you don't have a governance structure in place that leverages interdepartmental structure, it becomes hard to make decisions about how to manage these new technology solutions, how to implement them, and how to use the data from them. Data and outcomes, which we'll talk more about here. Partnership is a really important one, where you're partnering with other sectors like business in new ways, or you're partnering with your neighbors, your jurisdictions, that I know both of these panelists will talk about today. Funding and procurement is a big one. How do we dedicate funding to innovation and doing these new sorts of technology experiments and demonstrations? And how do you procure them? If you don't know how to write an RFP, you need to have processes for engaging with other people and other experts to inform what it is that you need for your community. So we're going to dive into those 4. I won't touch on the other 4. I hope you'll come back on Thursday when we'll talk about the next. And we're really going to dive into these first 4 today and experience that these jurisdictions have in actually implementing them with real smart cities projects. So the last few caveats about those elements is, one, that it's not a comprehensive list. These are not the only things you need to do in order to build smarter government. You don't have to do all of them. You can pick and choose and start with ones that you think are most important. And there's no particular order or priority to them either. So don't think by the numbers that you have to have governance first. These is really kind of a mixed bag in terms of where you want to begin. But we do think that, and we do find in our work in this space, that all 8 of them are very important. So these are the 4 we're going to focus on today. I won't talk any more about them. I'll let our experts do the talking here. But these are 4 of definitely the essential things to making your city smarter. So our panelists for today, we're going to begin with a collaboration between the City of Centennial and Alicia Thomas, who's the Deputy City Manager, and a collaboration they have with Arapahoe County's Public Safety. We have Chief Thompson here representing Arapahoe County, and they're going to chat through a project that they've been working on together and how that project has touched on each of those 4 elements that we mentioned earlier. And then we'll transition to John Jackson, who's the City Manager for the City of Greenwood Village. I'm a very strong champion of smart cities, and hear from them, or hear from him about how they've been working on these as well. But Alicia and Chief Thompson, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Thank
Should
you,
be
Tyler.
yours when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Are you able to see the screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you for having Chief Thompson and I here today. I think we celebrate our partnership and our relationship with the county as it's been longstanding since we incorporated as a city 20 years ago. So the City of Centennial is just on the brink of our 20-year celebration. But this entire time, we have had a successful partnership with County for our law enforcement services. Sorry, let me just go ahead and there we go. So let me just give you a little bit of a brief introduction to our partnership. As I mentioned, the City of Centennial entered into a contractual relationship when we incorporated for law enforcement services with the Arapahoe County. City of Centennial is a little bit more unique in their delivery of services, where we use public partnerships as well as public-private partnerships to deliver our services to a community of over 100,000. We're about 30 square miles, so we're one of the larger cities in the metropolitan area, but we do things a little bit differently. We have just about 70 employees that actually are City of Centennial employees, but we find ourselves really surrounded by contractual partnerships that extends through the community and serves our citizens and businesses. One area that we want to focus on today, although there are many elements of our partnership that we'll highlight later in the presentation, which really represent the four first elements of smart cities. We're going to just start with the CoResponder program that we introduced to our community in 2019. And I will let Chief Thompson explain that a little bit more, but this is something that we're really proud of and something that the county has partnered with the city on in order to deliver not just to the City of Centennial, but also the residents of Arapahoe County. CoResponder programs, as we've seen throughout the metropolitan area, are starting to grow and have been very successful. I'll say in our partnership, we looked at it in a great deal because we wanted to make sure that we were able to allow the deputies to be on the street where we needed them most. And then also in those instances where we saw mental health calls needing the right professionals in that space, we wanted to make sure that we were partnering them with those specialists so that they can get the right attention and help that they needed. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off over to you, Chief Thompson.
Thanks, Alicia. I appreciate that. And yeah, our CoResponder program, really the idea goes back several years when I started looking at grants for a CoResponder program. And traditional CoResponder programs pair a mental health clinician with a law enforcement officer, whether it's a police officer or in our case, deputy sheriff, to respond to those members of our community that are in crisis, mental health or behavioral crisis. So we started looking at those programs. We identified that maybe the traditional program wasn't necessarily what we needed to have to best serve our citizens because of some geographical and service area characteristics that are unique for us. So, but essentially what we came up with was identifying that we needed a manager for our program to run the program. That was a full-time employee of the sheriff's office, funded by Centennial. And then we were going to contract with a community mental health provider to have the mental health clinicians who were going to do the work on the street. We also identified that we would need vehicles and equipment, and we wanted the clinicians to be able to respond independently of the police officer or deputy sheriff, so that way they wouldn't be stuck on non-mental health related type calls, and they'd be able to respond across our service area, no matter if it was on the far west side or far east side of the city, to be able to handle those calls as needed. So basically they respond independently and they rendezvous with our deputies on scene. The other thing about this model is it also allows them to respond to calls independently for situations where a law enforcement officer is actually not even needed to respond. So that's kind of what we did. We started working in 2018 to fund that program for 2019. And you can see on the screen The budget was a collaboration between the city of Centennial and Arapahoe County, so it serves our entire service area for the sheriff's office. So Alicia, if you could go to the next screen, we'll talk about what we basically wanted to do. When we were initially talking about this program, one of the things that we maybe struggled with a little bit is, well, how many calls are they actually going to be used on? Do we know what the need is? What's the need? We knew intuitively that these programs were necessary, but we didn't really know how many calls we were handling. So we developed some program metrics. So we started tracking the actual data that we needed to answer those questions and be able to demonstrate that need and see if we need more, or if we're at about the right staffing, or exactly what are the impacts for our community and the service area. So in 2020, by the time we got the program stood up full-time, we had a full year's worth of data that we were able to evaluate. And it turns out that we had 1,645 mental health related calls in that year. We track those calls through our computer-aided dispatch in our dispatch center, and they have particular call types. We knew there were some call types that would not be necessarily identified as a mental health related call. So what we did was started tracking, okay, how many of these calls come in as a suspicious person, or maybe a family disturbance, that really the root of the issue is a mental health related incident where we need those clinicians to respond. Turns out that we would have missed or underestimated our number of calls by 675, or 41% of those calls we've previously gone unidentified if I was asked just to take the call codes that I knew were mental health related. I would have missed almost over 40% of those calls. We also started tracking the number of hours that the deputies were freed up. So the deputy responds with the co-responder, they get there, situation's under control, and the co-responder, the clinician, is just going to handle the call, frees up the officer to get back to doing law enforcement related work. So in 2020, we identified that there was 233 hours of law enforcement time saved, where the co-responders, the clinicians, were able to free up a deputy to go back and do law enforcement type activities. And then 51% of these calls were resolved by the co-responder at the scene. So no additional action was needed. They didn't need to be transported anywhere. And only 2 of those calls ended up in arrest for the entire year, 2% of those calls. So very successful impacts for us. And Alicia, if you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk about what we did learn through that. So originally we were contracting for our clinicians, and we identified that, if we actually bring this program in-house, we will have better control over the data we're receiving, better control over how we're deploying those clinicians, and provide additional supervision for them. So we identified that we were going to bring that program in-house instead of contracting for those clinicians. And we requested that budget, and we have successfully done that now. So we transitioned. Our clinicians are actually employees of the sheriff's office now, and we have really seen some great success with that already. Having them here, us being able to train them, work with them, and not have to rely on a community mental health provider to get those employees to us in a timely manner. So that's basically, I think, I've got. Alicia, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. I think, again, this is one component of our relationship that has seen a great deal of success for our community and for our businesses. The other smart elements, I think, also are highlighted within our relationship. And over time, in the past 20 years, we have evolved a great deal. We've had a lot of lessons that we've learned. But one thing that I do really want to highlight is the working relationship that we have. And so Chief Thompson and I really address some of the day-to-day issues, but then we partner with the city manager and the sheriff to make sure that we have the structure defined in order to be delivering effective services and responding to those things that may work well, and then also that may not work so well. So the chief just highlighted one area where we had to change our process and the way that we did things so that we could be more responsive. The one thing that we really do try to do in our contractual relationship is really look at the outcomes that we're trying to gain from this. And so again, we celebrate being one of the safest cities in Colorado, over a population over 100,000. And the county has spent a great deal of training time and the professionalism that they provide to their day-to-day work has allowed them to be COLIA accredited time and time and time again. And so this is the outcome that we really look at, and that we make sure that, I mean, all the data that goes into that accreditation really makes sense in really what we see out on the street and the high standards that are delivered to our community. Again, as I mentioned, it's a partnership. I really do appreciate, again, the county will set their standards and their policies. However, they work with us to better understand what that looks like, and if that's in alignment with what our council is trying to deliver to the community. The funding and procurement, I will say we have looked at this both ways to see if something separate from a partnership was the best way for us to deliver services to the community. But we're able to provide, again, a very safe city, a very I think at a very low price to our taxpayers. And this is something that we talk about a lot, because the economies of scale that we gain through this partnership, the access to the specialized response teams that the city also has with this partnership is something that we wouldn't be able to achieve if we did it on our own. So again, I hope this explains a little bit more of where we touch the four elements. And if there's some questions, just please let me know, Tyler.
Thank you, Alicia and Chief Thompson. I think that's a great example of all four of these elements, right? I mean, you're taking an existing process or program and evolving it, being innovative in how you deliver those services in more effective ways. You're using data to measure the outcomes of that program. You've partnered together across jurisdictions here to make something more efficient and figured out a way to fund it and to keep it funded. Sounds like into the future. So that's great. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to digging more into this in the Q&A period. Awesome. Well, we're going to transition now to a neighboring jurisdiction, I believe also in Arapahoe County, but doing a lot in the smart cities space. John Jackson is the city manager there, and I've had the pleasure of working with him on a number of projects, and he's going to chat through what the city is working on in the smart city space and how it touches on these elements as well. So John, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate my neighbors in Centennial for what they're doing with that program, because it's very, very important. I had the pleasure to work with Chief Thompson for quite a while. And we do consider Centennial to be one of our best suburbs, no question about it. Tyler gave me about 10 minutes to talk about quite an array of projects that we've been a part of. And what I want to do is run through the strategies after the project, is how they relate to these four qualities. I think it's important to start out with a little bit of background about the city and what Tyler said with regard to what SMART is, using new ways to solve complex problems. And I see that as a way of thinking as opposed to a way of acting. In Greenwood Village, we're a very outcome-based city, and In all actuality, our entire premise is built on the quality of life of our community. So Greenwood Village is located north of Centennial and south of Denver, right in the middle. We're about 8 square miles. We have 3 light rail stations, but we're distinctly different with residential and commercial. We're home to 2/3 of the Denver Tech Center, which is a very dense urban employment center. And then we have about 15,000, 16,000 residents that call Greenwood Village home. It's interesting when we start bringing all of these people to the city through the day and then getting them out or bringing them back for a concert. It's critically important that our transportation system works well. It's critically important that our communication systems work well. And everything we do is outcome based. We don't worry about numbers. You'll never hear our police department talk about numbers of tickets or numbers of arrests. You can't confuse numbers with data. And those are simply outputs. I think what it takes is, in many regards, leaders thinking differently, a lot more strategic. And it requires you really kind of to think smarter and work smarter versus harder when you shake it all out. So how do you do that? What's that look like? What does a suburban town do to be smart? And I want to preface it by saying, I don't believe we've reached anything to call ourselves smart. A lot of our areas today will focus on technology-driven solutions, but that isn't the only way to define that. And so we'll start with how last year we purchased all of our streetlights from Excel. It was really important to the city to control your own destiny with new laws that come in and find a way to control the vertical infrastructure as opposed to just putting up more poles. We wanted a way to leverage the power grid in Greenwood Village to where we could use it in the future. Now, we were the first municipality in Colorado to complete this purchase and sale. And I would say that although we do own it now, we maintain it now, it really was not the purchase just to own it philosophy. We're going to leverage this. A really simple way to measure how this is successful is to look at the amount of money that it saves per year. So we estimated $60,844 a year is saved in electrical use, from tariff to just simple electrical use. There's your realized savings. So on a standard street light, it costs about $17.27 a month to power it. We're switching everything to LED and paying service only, and it's $4.20. It's a massive amount of savings, and we then are now coupling it with a light survey that's going to take us down the road of moving all of our commercial traffic ways to LED into the residentials, and then converting the entire lighting system to where it's more smart and we can control it from apart and above. The governance and process of this is very, very important. And what I worked with our council on was controlling our vertical infrastructure so that we could figure out where we go with this. And what you really can control is the aesthetics, where they go, how high they can be, what they look like as far as color, what they'll control, above ground, below ground, vaults, boxes, all of that now comes in what we did in April, adopted and then have amended again in October of 2019 as a full 59-page book about how it is done in Greenwood Village. This is a simple way to organize the process for both the staff and the vendor. We brought Verizon in. People said they would never tell you. We brought AT&T in. They said they would never tell you. We got them all in the same room, and we talked about what they needed, and we built this together through a collaborative process and said, this is what we're going to do going forward. All of our power for this will now look the same. What we're doing now is very similar to what Centennial did. We're going to control now and put in fiber underneath, and we're working on the governance model with that with council right now to figure out what model that's going to be and what process that will be. If it's viable, we will then have infrastructure subterranean and above ground. What's below will do the backhaul, and we'll connect every home in Greenwood Village to fiber. That is the long-range term planning that you have to keep your governance involved in, apprised of, and making good decisions for. It is a process. It takes a lot of data to prove, to talk, to be able to understand that, and it takes massive amounts of partnerships to bring that to life. You can't talk about smart without talking about transportation to a degree. So we have broken transportation into 4 pieces in our comprehensive plan, and it's those that you see on the screen. So you'll see technology is only one of those components, but it's a big part of it. We build roads to be smart. We big picture think and create policies and goals to maintain and enhance the quality of life for our residents. We believe that this is how you move traffic. And I'll tell you how we do that. We use existing proven strategies. These are the process of taking data through sensors and putting it into the system to where others can use and see it in a way that helps manage their travels through their day. As Tyler mentioned before, we're working on an autonomous vehicle pilot project with 3 other cities, two other cities, 3 total, that'll move through our Denver Tech Center. If given the grant, we should find out about that this month. That'll allow these vehicles to traverse our cities to get that first last mile connection to light rail. Autonomous vehicles on the roadway are not something that is prevalent. It's not out there right now as far as it's common, but we're trying to pilot this process to show that it can work for us. We're involved in a project right now of smart metering traffic onto I25. That project is going to be starting here real soon. And it's a process, it's a partnership with CDOT, but we have to put traffic onto and get it off of I25 in a way that is leveraging all the available technologies to time it. We're committing infrastructure improvements with smarter options. We're putting in adaptive technology, and I'm going to show you how our streetlights works. But in using what's called Bluetooth, it's a travel time indicator for the entire corridor. Our traffic signals are all connected and smart and advanced in that they're talking to each other, and we have them connected. We have them so smart now that they can actually talk to Audi vehicles and tell them which lane to be in to optimize their movement through an intersection. This is an example right here that will showcase how people are seeing our data on CoTrip, and it changes in an interactive way that's live to the driver wherever their fastest route might be. This is again using Bluetooth and how we connect through CDOT and give people the safest, most efficient ways to travel. Now you might ask, how do you bring all these people into and out of for a concert? Well, we learned long ago that at Fiddler's Green, they can hold 18,000 people. So getting them in is a filter because they come in at different times, but getting them out is a flush. And I don't mean that in the sense of that it's a toilet, but it really is. We have to flush the people in the roadways as clear and fast as we can. So we program all of our signals where we flip a switch. Every signal traffics and monitors to the time that each of those intersections needs to move and open and get vehicles onto and out of Greenwood Village into Centennial or wherever as soon as they can to hit the main roadways. This is a process of moving traffic smarter, not putting police officers or deputy sheriffs in intersections waving their hands with a flashlight trying to make it work. Let the signals work if you can program them. So with this, I told the police department, you should never stand in an intersection again. We're going to let the traffic lights, traffic signals that are programmed clear the roadways. We can empty the entire venue and have traffic gone in less than 20 minutes. We have an opt-in feature on concert day to tell people how this works, where they can park and what they can do. It's all in how you communicate with them. So let's talk about those Audi cars. This is our TTS solution that literally is cloud-based, and it programs messages into cars that are properly equipped as they approach intersections. They get messages on which lanes to be in, how long their delay will be, and it is totally functional into and out of several different styles of vehicles. We're working with the auto manufacturers right now to try and grow that a bit, but this has been a very proven way to use what I will call smart traffic signals that are programmed and connected in a way that thoroughly helps people who drive Audis. This is how you can receive performance metrics and manage traffic decisions without being on the scene. It's a private partnership with TTS, and we're getting that data on a daily basis, and it really has been very productive. So as you talk about working things through a corridor, the I25 corridor, this is a multi-jurisdictional traffic management problem that goes from Lincoln and Lone Tree all the way up to Greenwood Village on Bellevue. Our purpose was to install the same smart level traffic signals throughout each of these 3 cities, which we've done, connect them, which we've done, and then allow them to be programmed for an efficient flow of traffic that is responsive to the traffic signals and need. It makes it safer, it's data driven, and it's all connected across jurisdictions. We believe this is an incredibly smart way to manage traffic through a very busy area. This is an example of 3 cities who have said, we're going to work together with phase 1 traffic management and technology. It connects to phase 2 public safety. All the video is available, and this is what is and was a pilot project, but it makes cross-jurisdictional approach to managing traffic solutions and congestion easier. You can call it smarter, you can call it better, whatever you want to call it. It makes it flow in a way that people like better. So outside of traffic, there's a lot of other solutions I want to touch on before I spend my 10 minutes. But as parks, trails, and recreation, I think it's time to look at how we mow lawns and how the motors run. So we've installed EFI, electric fuel injectors, on all of our mowers. Our mowers in parks are battery powered, they're rechargeable, it's less noise, it's less emissions, and we find that these mowers have been very well received. We have converted to a central irrigation system that's connected. It's software and sensor controlled, so we water as needed. If you know anything about Greenwood Village, you know that our parks are our cherished gems. They're very, very well used, and they must look incredibly nice. So we've saved hundreds of thousands of gallons through doing this. We use the internet basically to control the water meters and how this is all done through remote monitoring. The reduction in water consumption is how you measure then how you're watering smarter, how you're irrigating in a way that is responsible as opposed to just consumption. We've installed electric vehicles charging stations at our maintenance center. We can measure that. We know that this is the direction of many of the transportation vehicles that are going. So we're now pulling these EV charging stations out across our city. We started at our maintenance facility, and we have seen great use of them. Public safety, as Chief Thompson knows.
Hey, John, I just want to give you a heads up. You got about 2 minutes left.
Got it. Public safety is a critical important of every community. These are the ways that we're communicating and setting up how we do what we do. It's how we talk. We're using drones to measure accident scenes, clear I-25 in 8 to 10 minutes. We're wearing all kinds of technology on our officers, and they're communicating in a way that's connected. I hate email, so we're trying to get rid of email. As a way to connect, you have to think how systems connect. Now, how all this connects to governance, data, and outcomes. These are partnerships that are forever made and engendered in how you do what you do. But what I see frequently people do is chasing these shiny objects that are new, or you get a call from a vendor, and you can't chase this. You have to figure out what your solutions are and what your problems are. So there are your key strategies that I've come up with. You have to connect with your partners, internal, external, and political, and always talk to them. Sharing information is critical. Use data when you can to make your decisions, because that's how you make good decisions. There is no excuse for you not to be in the field as a leader to understand what people are seeing and how you can fix it. This all bubbles up into and through leadership to where you have set up the situation with ownership to solve the problem. Leaders establish clear outcomes and manage their incoming distractions. Time becomes your commodity. Thinking smarter is the way it is. These other points about accountability and recognition, there will be failures. You just have to let them go and learn from them. But at all points here, don't get out in front of your leadership or your political body. It's the setup that creates the good outcome, no matter what kind of technology you're buying. As a leader, you should stay in your lane and understand that you have weaknesses and strengths within your organization, and you can't move faster than you can be followed. Knowing that you have those weaknesses is critical to this. Building your organization around it is what will give you the final and good outcomes. I thank you, and I'll kick it back to Tyler.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. That was a great overview of everything that the city is up to and this, I guess, smart cities space, from streetlights and purchasing those back and leveraging them to dictate to the industry, to the 5G industry, how the city wants to see their development, to adaptive traffic signals across jurisdictions. So you guys are doing a lot. I appreciate you sharing your insight and wisdom from going through a lot of that experience as it relates to good, smart government. So I want to transition now to an opportunity to ask some questions of the panel. For those of you in the audience who want, please go ahead and queue your questions into the Q&A function, and Sarah can read those as they come in, but I've got a few to start. And one of them is, we focused on 4 of those elements, and heard from Centennial, from Greenwood Village and Arapahoe County, how they've walked through those. Would you say that one of those elements is more difficult than the other? And vice versa, is there one that's maybe most important in the experience that you've been through? And I'll throw it over to Alicia and Chief Thompson first, since John just finished up.
Go ahead, Chief, you want to start off?
I believe the partnership piece, for me, I know that establishing those relationships and those partnerships is critically important, because that's kind of where everything evolves from for us. I know in our relationship, that piece of working together to identify goals, the outcomes, as John Jackson said, outcome based, but we focus on that a lot too, and we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our community. And it's the partnerships that, for me, help me to do that in my role.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think the partnership in our case has been essential and critical to the success, making sure that we're both aligned towards achieving the same goals. I think something that takes a little bit of understanding and negotiating maybe around all the members around the table is really what outcomes we're trying to achieve. So when I think about the CoResponder program, responding to our community in the right way, we needed to really determine what outcomes we were going to strive to achieve and if they were the right outcomes. And so there's a little bit of, I don't want to say negotiating, but maybe making sure that those were the right goals. And then touching back with our council and with each other to say, okay, well, if we're being effective, are we being effective in the right space? And so understanding that, I don't think is necessarily a challenge or a hard thing, but I think it does need to, you need to have an open mind and be able to alter your path if need be, which in this case we did. We found that it was better to bring this back in-house to get the service level that we really wanted to achieve. Great.
And John, I'll throw pretty much the same question to you with a little angle on it. I mean, Arapahoe County and the City of Centennial, we're talking about partnership between public agencies. I know you've worked a lot with the private sector. Can you talk about how you all establish those outcomes and come to agreement on what you want to accomplish when you're working with the private sector?
I would say that the governance is the most challenging because it is more external with the private sector or your political body, and keeping them connected with what the outcomes should be, and then what you're doing on it is for me, very challenging. And so I'm fortunate to have a very supportive council, but keeping it connected, keeping it coordinated, and establishing that as a premise that is important becomes difficult, because as everybody knows, you don't work on just one project at a time. You're forced into having 15 things, 20 things going at once. And it's critically important that everyone is kept up to speed, that everyone has an understanding of where all of those projects and priorities are, to be able to keep moving forward, to be able to keep the funding coming your way, to be able to keep the political support and the private partnerships continuing to ask. You just have to keep outreach going at a level that is what most people struggle with or can't expect how difficult that is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Communication is essential, and I think when we're working on projects, because we do a lot of facilitation between public and private, when goals don't necessarily align and the outcomes aren't shared, that's when projects go off the chains, and you have to constantly remind people of where those goals are and how whatever you're doing today is moving towards them, to keep everyone on the same page. Another question for you all is, I guess, what is one particular barrier that you faced in implementing your project? In the CoResponder program, I'll throw it to Chief Thompson first. What was one barrier that you had to overcome, and how did it maybe halt progress in the interim?
I think as we identified the need for those outcomes and to receive that data, working with a contract model with some restrictions that were in place there, we really had a need to get more data than what we were being provided, which is ultimately was one of the reasons that led to us coming to an in-house program, because we wanted to make sure, as Alicia noted, that we're providing the proper outcomes, and we wanted to make sure that we were collecting the information to make good decisions about that program and to ensure that we were doing that. So I think that was one of the hurdles that we had, and we just had to adjust, and we had to inform not only City Council and but the Board County Commissioners also, because this program services our entire service area. And so explaining that to them and basically having the information in place to not sell that, but to explain why that was necessary and how we were going to go about doing that, and then having a plan to accomplish it was a hurdle, but ultimately I think we ended up with a better program for it.
Anything to add there, Alicia?
No, I would just reiterate, we really do want to provide our elected officials the data that they need to make those budget and policy decisions. And so that's one thing that I know that we try to do each year, especially with just a higher need for public safety in our communities, and what that does in the draw on the general fund. We really want to make sure that we're able to present the best business case, and so that has to be supported by that data. It has to be supported by that logic, so council can make those appropriate decisions. Right.
And John, I'm sure you've come across many barriers in getting a lot of these programs up and running and implemented. Any one in particular that you'd like to share?
Yeah, one of the barriers for me, and I have to be cognizant of all the time, is the layers and levels of complexity that these projects have. Not everybody has a clear understanding of what those are. One of my most recent failures was we converted to an IP-based phone system, and I made kind of the overt decision that we wouldn't have to do much training on that IP-based phone. well, I was wrong, and I didn't understand why my computer rang, my phone rang, and my cell phone rang all at the same time. I really didn't know which one to answer. And I made a very quick realization that I didn't hurdle a barrier there with getting everybody to the right level of understanding that you won't have to dial 9 to get out on an IP-based phone. there's getting everybody to that basic understanding of whatever you're working on. If you don't do that, you have created a significant barrier that will be in your pathway forward.
I feel you. Yeah, and it gets even more complex when you start talking about things more complex than phone systems, right? You talk about fiber systems and all sorts of things. Well, thanks for highlighting those barriers. Sarah, I want to check with you and see if there are any questions in the Q&A function that have come up.
Thanks, Tyler. We have received one question from Centennial Council member Marlo Alston. How important is it to work with council on keeping cities safe?
I think that's for you, Glenn.
I was going to suggest that John answer that one because no, I think we kind of highlighted it a second ago in response to Tyler, one of the questions that you asked, but it's critically important to identify your goals and what are the outcomes, and not only for projects, but for your particular jurisdiction, service area, your community. I think one thing that we've experienced the past year or so is there's a lot of generalizations out there related to public safety and law enforcement and some of the issues. And we did a series that was last year, wasn't it, Alicia? Where we did a number of presentations from the Sheriff's Office on how our agency works and how it is different from maybe some of the other jurisdictions that you're being inundated now, not only nationwide, but our own metro area. And it's important to highlight and to explain how we're doing things in our community to make things better. And to probably, I think that information sharing is really important to so that they understand what's going on in their community and they don't just see something on the evening news and assume that that's the way we're doing it.
Yeah, I would just, I will say one thing I really do appreciate with our council in regards to public safety is sometimes those initiatives are brought to us from our council. And for instance, had several years ago included an additional school resource officer in our elementary school. And that was an initiative that was brought to us by a council member. The CoResponder Program also was something in response to interest from Councilmember Alston actually really supported and championed the CoResponder Program. And I think it's not only important, it's critical because they really are our policy body, and part of that is making sure that we have appropriate funding to achieve the outcomes that we want to see out in the community as well. So finding ways to be able to do all of that is important to work. Like I said, it's not just important, but critical to work with our council.
I think we're all going to use the same exact word with that, and that's a very strong take from this, and it's critical. So if you're not able to have a critical discussion with your political body, and how that discussion happens is up to you, you're going to struggle. The number one priority of government is to provide a safe environment for the citizens. Now, I'll cheat here and say I was the police chief in this city 7 years before I became the city manager. So I have a little bit of background, and I'm a little, public safety centric, some say. But if your community isn't safe, and I will say that's a perception, based on whatever they hear, see, feel, and read. If your community is not safe, it cannot grow. People will not attend your schools. They will not buy homes. They will not prosper with business in your community. It becomes the fundamental discussion that if you're not safe, you really struggle with anything else past that. We're fortunate in that we too are a very safe community, but it's not by other than design. And we put a heavy emphasis that comes from funding from our council, our ordinances from our council, and it's a true essence partnership that has to manifest itself out into the police or deputy sheriff's car. It is the first topic of discussion, in my opinion, about what a community needs to be. Safety, and it has to happen as a discussion with council.
Thank you all. Sarah, any other questions in the chat before I ask my last one?
Tyler, we have not received any additional questions. We have 4 minutes remaining.
Beautiful. Well, I guess the last question that I'll leave with you all is, you know, a lot of jurisdictions, and I hope many of those that have attended are either part of a Smart Cities program or a lot of cities are considering one, and what their role is in becoming smarter. If you had one piece of advice to recommend to other jurisdictions that are looking at these types of projects or starting an innovation or a Smart Cities program, what might that be? And John, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
I would start with a conversation about what is needed internally and externally in your community. Far too many communities think they know what is needed or what the citizens want. And I think it starts with an open dialogue and a discussion about what is problematic for them. It could be their trash. It could be the traffic flow. It could be a homeless encampment down the street. You just don't know until you ask them, and you have to focus on what the needs of the community are. What does the business or person on 123 Main Street need? And that is what you should focus and tailor your services to as best you can. Thinking differently is trying to tailor that complex problem, if it is, to more of a smarter solution. And I think that's the role of today's leaders.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the first things that we do with any member jurisdiction we work with is sit down and understand their needs and their challenges. And that's what you apply a Smart Cities lens to, is what sorts of new tools are out there that we could try to approach this problem in new and different ways. If it's first and last mile, in this case, you know, let's look at what electric automated shuttles can do to reduce costs and connect people to that last mile. But there's lots of different tools out there. So Alicia or Chief Thompson, do you have any final thoughts on recommendations for other jurisdictions?
I might just pull on a little bit of what John said, and I think really understanding and identifying the problem you're trying to solve. I think sometimes we go with the answer first and we really don't understand the root of the problem. And so to me, it's, I mean, there's a lot of great things out there that we can avail ourselves to, tools, technology, but if they're not really addressing our problems within our community, we're distracted by that. So I think our taxpayers rely on us to be part of the community to understand what they need, as John mentioned, and if we're not solving the problems, then we can't really use those tools. So that's what I would say.
They both say it perfectly, and I'll refer, I think, to what Alicia just said and what John said earlier is don't get too enamored with this shiny object and chase something that isn't really addressing your issues or your problem. You have to be able to evaluate that critically and based on the needs of your community and those that you're serving.
Wonderful. Well, that was a great way to button everything up, and I think everyone's on the same page. Focus on your problems. and that'll help you inform the right solutions. So thank you to everyone that was able to attend today. I hope that many of you will join us on Thursday. We'll talk through the other 4 elements and welcome a couple of new jurisdictions to talk about their experience working with those. Sarah, thank you so much.
Take care, Glenn. Good to
Thank
see you, buddy.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you to all of our presenters today for sharing their knowledge. We'd like to thank you, our listeners, for attending as well. This webinar was recorded, and the recording, handouts, and presentation materials will be posted to our website by the end of the week under training materials. As a reminder, part 2 of this webinar will take place on Thursday at noon, and we hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining us today. This concludes the webinar. Have a nice afternoon.
See you, Glenn. Be safe, buddy.